Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of our podcast. Today we are going to be focusing on what you could term as business expressions, but you could also say that it's kind of like business slang or even business buzzwords. And to explain a little bit more and to go into a little bit more detail, as usual, Alistair is here with me. Hi Alistair, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Back from the holidays, refreshed and raring to go to do some recording,
very
some
good.
more podcasts.
Good to hear.
And you?
Good to hear that you're refreshed. That's yeah. Also, just back from a holiday, so I'm equally refreshed as well.
Back to work.
Yeah, absolutely. Like everybody probably.
Yeah.
At least,
sure.
Well, we're recording. Yeah, I mean, by the time this comes out, I think probably.
It'll be a while.
Quite a lot of people will be back
at work,
won't they? So,
back to the grindstone.
Good. Okay.
As we say sometimes.
Back to the grindstone. That's right. Yeah. So today we're looking at slang, but we wanted to just highlight a little word little error, in fact, that often happens when Spanish speakers talk about slang, because they often say slangs, don't they, Alistair? And we kind of wondered why this happens. We weren't 100% sure of the origin of this particular problem, but I've heard it several times, and normally when one mistake is kind of mentioned a few times, I'm kind of pretty much sure that a whole variety of other people normally will say the same thing, because language problems seem to be fairly universal in many contexts, right? You hear the mistake once and then you hear it again and again and again. And certainly what I felt is that I have heard this particular mistake, slangs, quite a few times.
Yeah, I haven't heard it a huge amount, but I have heard it. I've had people say slangs in plural, and we don't use it in that way. Now it's strange because I'm fairly sure, and I could be wrong, and people can please email in and correct us, that in Spanish, the translation is jerga, but I don't think I've ever heard Spanish people say jergas in plural that I'm aware of.
That's right.
So I think they also say just jerga in the singular, if you like. So I'm not quite sure if it doesn't seem to be coming from the Spanish, but maybe I'm wrong. People can correct us on that. So it's one of those ones, usually we know where it comes from. You go, this is from Spanish, that's why they're making this mistake. But in this case, I'm not sure. So I don't really know why some people say slangs in plural. A mystery.
That's right. But
then it's one to avoid.
It's a bit of a mystery, that one, Yeah. And it's kind of a little bit like other simple mistakes as well, isn't it? Kind of like also maybe that you might have heard more frequently, the difference between, for example, if you can say slang but you can't say slangs, it's same idea related to sheep, for example. Also a kind of a common one where you say sheep and then you immediately assume that the plural is sheeps, right?
Well, that makes, I understand that mistake, because when you think about it, it's crazy that you can't count sheep. Aren't we supposed to count sheep to fall asleep? No, so in Spanish is a normal noun that's countable. So, you can have one is oreja y two orejas, which is perfectly logical. So I understand why a Spanish speaker or any speaker of another language, because I'm pretty sure in every language it's going to be a countable word. It makes sense. No, you can count lions and dogs and cats. Why not sheep? So I understand why a Spanish speaker would say, two sheeps, or there are many sheeps in that field.
Exactly.
It makes perfect sense. But then you have to correct them, and they're always, what? I say, no, you can't count sheep. They go, you can't count sheep? Why not? Oh, I don't know. But unfortunately, it's one sheep, two sheep, three sheep, 5 million sheep. So it's not exactly uncountable. It's just like a singular word that never changes. Technically, I don't know if it's exactly uncountable, but it's always the same word. So it doesn't matter how many sheep, we just say sheep. We never say sheeps. So a common mistake is, 3 sheeps. And you go, no, it's 3 sheep. And they're like, what? So that mistake I fully understand, because I must admit in English is ridiculous.
Why
can't you count
sheep?
So do I. You can count dogs and cats. No?
That's right.
But weirdly in English,
it's not a very...
You can't.
It's not a very business sort of...
No.
You're probably not going to talk about sheep very often.
No, but
in
occasionally,
your business meeting, unless you haven't... unless you're talking about your sort of sleeping habits and
or
you're
the black
saying,
sheep of the
I was trying to
family.
count...
which is an expression
Oh,
that
that
is
one.
same in Spanish.
Yeah, there are.
If you had
It's
more
true,
than
it's
one,
true, yeah.
2 black sheeps, no, only 2 black sheep in the family. So
That's-
just the word sheep never changes. It's always the same. There's never an S on it, weirdly.
Yeah.
And there's
Yeah.
another one, isn't there, that
Yeah,
you
that's-
mentioned
that's
in your
interesting.
Friday mail is, what was the other
Email,
one?
yeah.
Another
which
animal.
was, fish.
Fish.
Yeah.
So sheep and fish.
Again, yeah. Yeah. So if you go to the market
Hmm.
and you're going, go to the fish stall and you have to say, can I have 3 fish? Can't you?
Or
You
some
can't say
fish, or-
3 fishes.
No.
Yeah.
No. Although I do think
Now there
fishes,
Yeah,
sheep's
go on,
just
tell
doesn't
us.
exist, and it's never said. Fishes, I have heard occasionally, maybe in a documentary. I think if you're referring to different species of fish in the sea that exist, maybe you could say fishes. So I think it does exist. If people look it up in the dictionary, it probably will say fishes in plural is possible, but just it's a word we almost never use. So when you're just talking about fish in general, do you like fish? Do you eat fish? Do you eat a lot of fish? Look at those fish. If you see more than one fish in a river, you go, look at those fish, not those fishes. So we just
That's right.
generally, in 99% of the time, we do not say fishes. Although I think it does exist, and occasionally you might hear it, but for all for your daily uses of this word, don't say fishes. So sheep and fish, 1 or 2 doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And slang.
Yeah. For all intents and purposes.
I was about
for
to
all
say that, and then
intents
I stopped myself
purposes.
thinking,
Yeah.
it's a slightly complicated phrase. Do we want to go there?
That's
But
a
why not?
compliment. Yeah.
All
Okay.
Yeah.
Go on then. For
Well,
all
you
intents
say-
and
you've just-
purposes,
yeah.
Yeah, I explained it. I'll explain it. So for all intents and purposes basically means for 99% of the time,
effectively
right? It's
most of the time. This is the case, no, or something like
Yeah.
that. I don't know
That's
the
right.
exact definition,
That's
but
right.
say
It's
for all intents and
kinda-
purposes, just use fish. Fishes doesn't exist,
That's right.
but it does.
That's
but
right. That's right.
It's not very common.
Yeah.
Yeah, strange expression
And
for all intents and purposes. It's a weird expression when you analyse it.
Yeah, it is. It is an expression, and it's kind of like, it just really kind of, it's like a frase hecha in a way, right? You just need to know approximately what it means, which it could confuse you massively, obviously, if you hear that for the first time. But for all intents and purposes, means
useful in business.
basically.
in
You could
work
use
situation.
basically.
Yeah, I suppose basically. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's a good one. You might,
Basically,
maybe
we
people
just
not use it, but you might hear it in business meetings or business context. People saying, "Well, for all intents and purposes, da 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 da." So it's basically saying effectively, or more or less all the time.
Yeah.
This.
Yeah.
Anyway, we've gone off on a tangent, as we often do.
We have a
But
little
a
bit,
good
a
one.
little bit, but yeah. We did get a few emails about this issue, didn't we? About with the extra S, and I don't know whether you want to talk quickly about Ray first, and then I'll talk about Julio.
Okay, yeah, Ray. Well, he wasn't specifically on the question of the slangs or the slang.
No.
But he was more sort of saying, this is quite interesting, actually. I hadn't really thought about this. He says, I think here in Spain, and I think this applies to any country, I think here in Spain, we confuse dialects of the different provinces or regions with jergas. He puts jergas in plural with the S. I think like a bit of a joke, because we compared jergas, plural, and slangs.
Yeah.
So he puts it in inverted commas. So I think he's trying to say, we probably wouldn't say jergas in plural.
We would
I think
say
that's what he's
jergas,
trying to say. Anyway, he puts
No,
jergas.
I think so too.
Yeah, anyway, he says, it is, well, I need my glasses. What is it? I'm reading this. It is not correct when you don't understand the meaning of words or phrases. You sometimes take it for granted that it is slang, not slangs. So in other words, if you're in another part of your own country or another country that speaks the same language, it's like if we go to USA, for example, Australia, you don't understand a word, you sort of tend to assume that, it's because it's their slang, their strange way of speaking. I don't understand it. But he says, that's maybe not the case. It's maybe, you just don't understand a word that maybe is a standard word in your language, but it's just your own ignorance, I think is what he's trying to say. But we blame it on, it's slang, it's the way these people speak strangely in this part of Spain or this part of UK or whatever it is. So it's just a point that he's making.
Yeah. Yeah, because I mean, slang might be, we might be able to identify it as slang or not, or
I mean, it could be
might
slang,
be,
and
right?
that's why you don't understand, but maybe not.
That's true. Yeah,
You can't
Yeah,
assume necessarily.
And then we had an email from Julio, who actually kind of looked up. He was very proactive and looked up whether the definition, whether it was actually possible to say slangs in English, and he used an AI tool to go out there and have a look. And he actually came back to us saying that slangs is possible, that you can actually say it. Now,
which I didn't know.
Our reply to that would be that may be the case, but it's very, very unusual to hear the word slangs actually being said. It definitely, when you speak generally, you would always talk slang. You would always talk
a bit like
about,
the fishes, for all intents and purposes.
Exactly.
I've never said slangs, and I've never heard an English speaker, native speaker, say slangs in plural ever. But apparently, according to this AI, if we trust the AI to be right, I suppose it is, it does exist and you can use it. But again, I think it's fairly rare. And again, it's probably referring to like the fishes being different species. Maybe the slangs is that sort of use of,
Well, as well, could be, yes. It could be, yeah.
The different slangs in the English-speaking world.
Yes, maybe in that way.
Something like that.
Different slangs, yes, that's right, yes.
But I would say in that case, different use of slang, different slang expressions, different slang words. I would try to express in a different way. I would never say slangs, but according to who was it? I can't remember his name. Julio.
Julio, yeah.
Yeah, it is technically possible, but I would advise against. I'd say avoid slangs in plural if you can.
Sure. Yeah, it's probably one of those things that if you work in language, or if you work in very technical sort of, I don't know, if you work for the Oxford English Dictionary, potentially you would say no. This word does exist. So it's possible, but it's something that we never really use, is it?
No.
Good. All right. Now what we're going to do is we're going to actually look at a list, aren't we, that we have of these types of business slang words. Now, as we say, we can talk about them as being slang words, but we can also talk about them as being buzzwords, right? Buzzwords in it also kind of interesting word in itself, right, Alistair?
Well, you could say that's a sort of slang word, or at least a very relatively new word now that people use to explain. So when buzz is like the sound of like a buzzer, like ringing a door, or the sound of a bee. No, the buzz. It's onomatopoeic. So we can use buzz to describe a sound that sounds like buzz, but in this case, is a buzz word. Which sort of means like a fashionable word. So it's a word that is being used a lot in a particular moment that's become, I don't know, cool or fashionable. So suddenly the new buzzword in IT or in business world is this. I know, like brainstorming. Now that's a very common, accepted, normal word now. But there was a moment, I don't know when exactly, when it was invented that people suddenly started using brainstorming. So I mean, that didn't exist before. And then it became very quickly became fashionable, and lots of businesses and places said, hey, we need to do brainstorming. So that became the buzzword of the moment. Yeah. So I suppose what it means really is sort of popular, fashionable word that suddenly appears and everyone starts using it now.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, good. So we're going to do, I originally created a list of 10 words, but we're going to just focus on 5 today because from a number of different sources, we kind of identified that that these 5 are a little bit less well known, and for that reason, we're going to focus on them, and then hopefully give our audience today a little bit of an insight into these a little bit more difficult business buzzwords, let's say. And so the first one, well, actually, Alistair, from the list, did you have any problems with any of them, or did you
exactly? So even I
identify some
of the 10 that you put in your Friday email. There were 2 that I didn't know. I know the words. This is the point. This is where they're expressions. Yeah. Right? So one of them was bandwidth. Now, I know bandwidth, this meaning of your internet bandwidth that comes to your house, when your optic fiber or whatever. But I didn't know this use of it as a slang or buzzword expression. So that was new to me. Okay. And the other one was brain dump. Now, I understand the 2 words, brain and dump, and I can sort of imagine, but again, I hadn't heard it used in this with this particular
sort of,
meaning.
Yeah, in this business context.
So, there's two I didn't know. So, I wouldn't expect necessarily our listeners, readers to know them either. Maybe they do, because, I don't work. I'm a English teacher, coach. So I'm not working in a business environment. There's things that even Spanish speakers working in business may know and hear every day that I don't know.
Sure.
That's perfectly possible.
Yeah. Absolutely. Good. Okay. Well, maybe we can start with those two, to be honest. Bandwidth and brain dump. Bandwidth is an interesting one. I think it's basically your ability to do something. So you might have a certain level of bandwidth to complete a task. Often this can be related to maybe your own capacity to do something, but it also can be related to, it could be your capacity to do something yourself, or it could be your team's capacity to do something. I think more often it's like a manager talking about a particular ability for a team to do something. So for example, you might say, for this particular project, we don't have enough bandwidth at the moment to complete it or to do it properly.
Yeah. So that sort of makes sense, because when you think of the usual meaning of bandwidth, obviously if you haven't got enough bandwidth, it restricts what you're able to do, using internet. So if you have various pages, websites open at the same time, applications open, they won't work properly, or they'll be very slow because you don't have enough bandwidth, you don't have enough capacity. So that sort of makes sense in that.
It does. It does to a certain degree. Yeah. The metaphoric meaning of there is kind of like makes sense, doesn't it? Yeah. And then brain dump is kind of interesting in itself as well. In many cases, for me, this is very, very similar to brainstorm or doing a brainstorming session, like lluvia de ideas. We obviously the two words, if you separate the two words, brain is pretty easy to understand. Dump can be like basically word. When you, particularly, but if we go for the kind of general sense of a dump, you could have a rubbish dump, right?
That's what I was thinking.
So basically, you take where you take all the rubbish and you just throw stuff there. Basically.
Well, you dump it. Now you can use it as a verb. So you dump the rubbish, meaning you put or you place or throw the rubbish in a rubbish dump, the place where all the rubbish is piled up together. So I can sort of see here the brainstorming thing. It's like take all these ideas from your mind and put them together in one place.
Yeah, exactly.
So a collection of ideas, I suppose.
Yeah. You can also dump something on the side of the road, for example, in many situations.
Leaves on them. Yeah. Somebody's dumped the fridge in the river or dumped their car, just abandoned it in the middle of the road.
Yeah. But a brain dump is clearly any idea that you might have. In that way, it's similar to a brainstorming session, right? You just take all the ideas that you have and put them down on a piece of paper, potentially. So, yeah. So it's an interesting one as well. So those are the two you didn't understand, or you weren't 100% clear on.
Yeah, I could sort of try to imagine what they meant, but I haven't heard them used in that way.
Yeah, exactly. And then we've got three more, which I thought were kind of interesting too. The first one being buy-in. And we got an email from Andre, and I think that was he identified a number that he didn't know, and I thought it was very interesting too. And I think buy-in was one of those. If I have a look, buy-in he didn't know, and that's kind of interesting. I kind of felt that it was more that one that I would use personally. I think I would use that in a business context, and the actual meaning there, obviously, it's kind of easy. The verb to buy, right? You buy something, but in that sort of business context, I think you would be using it in terms of trying to get somebody's support. So imagine that you wanted, I don't know, to build a new hospital or something, and you have to get the buy-in of the local community to get their support, or either the local authority or any other stakeholders that might be, close by, because suddenly you're going to get maybe a lot more noise, you're going to get traffic, more ambulances, you're going to get traffic, etc., right? Hospitals are also, big employers, etc. So you have to get the buy-in of the local community. Otherwise, there's going to be a lot of
protest, opposition.
Opposition to it. That's right. So that's essentially the idea of, getting somebody's buy-in is essentially getting their support. Now that might be an individual or an organization, whatever. Yeah.
Well, you can use it as a verb. I'd not actually heard it perhaps used as a noun in this way, although it means the same thing. So you can buy in to an idea or a concept as a verb, which means the same.
Yeah.
If you buy into something, you go along with it, you support it. So if if there's a local they're going to build a new road or something in your town. If you buy into it, you go, yeah, okay, I agree with that. I think it will be good.
Sure.
So you support it, as you said. So it's really the same idea, but using it as a noun. Try to get the buy-in of the local community or whoever it may be.
Yeah. Exactly right. So that's buy-in, which is, I think, fairly common. I have to say, it's not one that I would say, oh, I'd never use that. Certainly I would use it. And then two more, which I think are also very interesting. The first one being circle back. Now, circle back is interesting in the fact that it allows you to control the conversation a little bit more. In let's say, and this often happens, especially for non-native speakers who are kind of maybe struggling to understand, and they want to make a point and they want to then go back to a previous point that was discussed, right? So at this point, you might want to say, oh, I'd like to circle back to a previous point that we were discussing. Now, what does circle back mean? Basically means that you're just going back to a previous point that was discussed.
Return.
Okay? So I'd like
you're
to
returning. You're going back, returning to something that was said previously or earlier in the meeting. Or in the conversation.
That's right. So it's quite useful. It
makes a sense really.
Whether you want to use it,
and you circle.
It does.
Back. So you go in like the clock, anti-clockwise, go back in the other direction. That's right.
So fairly understandable. Again, whether you want to use that as actively or as just sort of so that you understand exactly what's going on from a passive point of view, trying to understand somebody else. Both of them can be useful, obviously. If you feel really comfortable with it, then start to use it, no problem. And then the last one being, and this is, I would say, a little bit more modern. I think I've never used this myself, but I think it's becoming more and more popular. Low-hanging fruit. What does that mean, Alistair? What would you perceive that to be?
Yeah, well, I understand the literal meaning. If you just imagine fruit trees, I don't know, apple trees, for example, and, the low-hanging fruit is the fruit of the tree. The apple, in this case, is hanging from the branch very low, so it's very easy to pick the fruit. You can just walk up and pick the apple, no? So I think in this sense, in a business sense, or this buzzword meaning, is like goals that are very easily attainable or objectives that are easy to achieve. That's my understanding. I know you might have another idea with an example.
That's exactly it. Yeah. Low-hanging fruit, yeah. I mean, in many cases, you might identify sort of that there is low-hanging fruit. So, like, we should identify the low-hanging fruit. It could be a strategy, for example. There's a certain amount of low-hanging fruit that maybe we could try to achieve or obtain as quickly as possible, and then go on to the more difficult tasks. I mean, essentially, low-hanging fruit can often mean sort of the idea, as you said, that it's easy to obtain. So maybe you might have a strategy to say, okay, well, because it's so easy, let's do it first, and then we
let's do the attainable goals.
Good start.
Maybe don't require a lot of effort or financial resources, perhaps. Let's do those first, get them done, and then we'll go for the fruit that is, at the top of the tree. It's more difficult to reach.
That's right.
To use the same, metaphor.
Kind of connects with another expression that I know, which is quick wins. Okay, quick wins. So you might identify low-hanging fruit, and that, because it's low-hanging fruit, it's easy to obtain, and that would then sort of be a quick win, because you're doing sort of that 80-20 principle of like, okay, the small amount of effort, what can I get back very fast, and so in this particular case, okay, well, that's low-hanging fruit. I think that's going to be a quick win. I mean, these types of expressions can come very fast once you start not really thinking about them consciously, right? And that can always be really, really difficult for non-natives when they suddenly hear all these weird expressions and kind of get completely confused, right? So
the low-hanging fruit, I'm not sure, but it could be used as a criticism. I was just thinking. So maybe somebody is a bit, oh, I've achieved this goal, I've done this, like, I'm fantastic. And somebody may say, oh, well, that's low-hanging fruit. Sort of saying, well, that's easy, that's not that difficult. So I don't know if people use it that way, but it could be maybe as a criticizing somebody who's, very proud of their achievement of attaining or achieving some objective or goal, that somebody else thinks that really wasn't that difficult. No, so low-hanging fruit.
That's right.
It's possible.
That's right. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It could be equally. So yeah, those are the 5 that we found, we thought were a bit more difficult, let's say. The other 5 were, I think most people sort of understood them. Just go through them quickly again. Bandwidth, okay, your capacity or your team's capacity to do something. Do you have enough bandwidth? Yes, we have enough bandwidth, or no, we don't have enough bandwidth. The second one was a brain dump, which is basically a brainstorming idea or concept where you put everything down on paper. Any idea that comes into your mind, you just literally write it down. Buy-in is to get support from, it could be a local community or an individual. So a very interesting idea there, and I think I definitely have used that type of expression in the past. Circle back is very much related to kind of going back in the conversation, circling back, referring back to a point that maybe might have been made in a meeting before or previously, right? And the last one being low-hanging fruit, which is sort of an easily attainable goal, So yeah, I think those are fairly useful and maybe also not quite so commonly known. So hopefully there's some value there for our listeners today. Good. Alistair, thank you very much for your time. I think that's it for today. We will be back again next week. But for the moment, thank you very much. And I'll see you very soon. Okay?
Yeah, thank you. Our pleasure as always. See you soon for the next one.
All right. Speak soon.
Cheers.
See you then. Bye-bye.